Larry Salazar, please take us through your journey and how it led you to NestSTEPS.
Through my journey, well, I'll tell you, it is an interesting journey because I've always had this passion for the home itself, because ultimately the home means so much to so many people, right? It's a need, it's also an aspiration. But it's interesting, when I was in high school, I took a lot of these courses in architecture and I took classes in drafting. That was always my passion. But when I got into college, I ended up studying something else. And as a result, I got into broadcast journalism. I got into marketing after that. I spent the next 30 years actually doing marketing, product management, communications. And somewhere along the way, I ended up working for a company called Health Equity, which provides health benefits. They provide HSAs and FSAs. And I remember vividly at one point, I was talking to them and explaining to them, I think we are offering something great, but what about offering a home savings account? Because there was always that passion for getting people into homes and so forth. And while they rejected that idea never left me. And after that, I moved on to another company, and something happened along the way. We went through a series of layoffs. And after I left that organization, I started helping my wife with building her real estate brokerage that she had recently launched. And it was at that time when we started asking the question, hey, there may be something that we could do, maybe more than what we're doing right now, to help people get into homes. And that's really the start of how we got to where we are today. We came up with this idea that, hey, if we created home ownership as a benefit for employees, we could make it more accessible to people and make it easier for people to get into the homes. That's sort of the origination story for us at NestSTEPS.
That sounds really meaningful. Thanks for sharing. So, Larry, could you share a little bit more about how that would work? Like how does NestSTEPS work, and how does that transform HR benefits for years to come?
Yeah. So NestSTEPS has three critical components. Okay. The first component is really to provide technology to enable employees and employers to be able to track progress of financial well-being. Now, when I talk about financial well-being, we do everything focused on home ownership. So as an employee, we help you to be more financially healthy with your behaviors, and we accelerate savings through that platform. And at the same time, for the employer, what we do is we provide tracking of its impact on your employees and its impact on their loyalty to the organization. So we're tracking how the retention rate is, and whether or not this program itself is drawing more talent for your talent acquisition programs, right? So that's the first piece. That is the technology that we provide that enables the employees. The second piece is going to be the empowerment. It's interesting. A lot of people talk about wanting to purchase a home, but the reality is a lot of people don't have any idea how to go about doing it. And if you try to talk to a realtor, just walk up to them and talk to a realtor, they're not going to spend that time to help prepare you over the next several months. Most realtors will give you maybe a piece of advice here and there, because what they're focused on is really building the relationship for those that are ready to purchase a home. And so you need education to prepare you for not only owning a home, but also if you already own a home, you probably need some education, some insights on how to ensure the value of the home is going to continue to provide appreciation, value, and equity for the future. So that's number two. The third piece is incentivization, right? We have to incentivize people. And so we work directly with the employer to create a contribution model that makes sense. And what this does is we take a look at what your turnover rate is, what your cost of replacing an employee is, and we identify how much money you can afford to pay for those contributions without going beyond offsetting the turnover cost that you already incur. You see, a lot of people think about contributions as, I'm going to dip into the bottom line. And they don't think about what they're already paying for because of the turnovers they're experiencing. And so what we're ultimately trying to do is offset those costs in a way that actually builds deep, durable loyalty. And for the employers, this means this is this is going to be very important for them, because when you think about the true cost of replacing an employee, right? That's somewhere between 50% to 200% of an employee's salary that you're trying to replace. Now, I talk to employers at times, and sometimes they'll say to me, well, I think it's only about $6,000 to $9,000 or something like that. But that's only because they're looking at the balance sheet. They're only accounting for the hard costs. And when you lose somebody, your teams get stretched. They experience enormous amount of stress. Productivity sometimes go down. Quality sometimes get compromised. And then all of this is happening. Your culture starts to erode. So they don't account for the soft cost that's embedded with every turnover. And so what we're trying to do is, again, not only address the cost, but to enrich the entire culture of the company.
Very nice. Could you share a success story where you've partnered with a client, or, maybe it's a homeowner success story, but something from your experience with this journey?
To share an experience, a partnership or a homeowner? Well, I'll tell you, I could tell you we had an experience just recently where we were actually providing an educational workshop for renters. Now, these are different, right? Because they're not really associated with an employer that is participating in a program. But I bring this up because there's something very valuable and very compelling in that experience. This room was packed, and we were going through the same content that we would normally give to employees if they were participating through an organization. Same content. And at one point, we explained to them the value of NestSTEPS and how the employer can participate. And while we were doing that presentation, one gal, she raised her hand. And this is verbatim. She says, if I had that benefit at my company, I would never leave. That's what she said, unsolicited. And then she added something to the effect that she would never risk a benefit like this for a few dollars more. Now, just think about that comment, and that one comment, and what it really says and what the implication is. One, she says she's going to be much more loyal to that employer. And two, she would forego incremental pay raises for housing benefits. And she's not alone, right? She's not alone. There are multiple studies that are out there now. And it indicates very clearly that a third of the employees that were sampled or surveyed would actually forego a pay raise in order to have housing benefits. That says a lot. And what our experience was that day was very clear to us. It resonated across the entire room.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What have you heard from employers in this journey when it comes to, what really resonates with them, and what are they seeing the value in here?
I think different employers have different perspectives, right? Some are very focused on retention. I'm not going to lie. They're just very narrowly focused on retention. And they're thinking about what can I offer that actually moves the needle? And that's very important, right? Because it's the biggest bulk of the cost that they spend when it comes to the workforce. They lose a ton of money with the turnovers. And so when we present this to them, the first inclination is, tell me how much would it save? And so we go through this analysis based on your turnover rate, based on what we know from the studies, what it could affect, how it could improve your retention. They light up when they start to see the real numbers. And that's an important piece, because when you think about, say, for instance, other benefits that are out there, and I worked in the HSA industry, right? I worked in that industry. Most benefits do not track impact. They track utilization of the tools, utilization of the benefits, but they don't track the impact to the employer. So that's one of the things that people get excited about. Another thing that people get excited about is financial wellness. And some people are very focused. They think that they have great turnover or retention rates, which is fine. That's fantastic. And so they're more focused on just providing a great benefit for their employees because they genuinely care about their financial well-being. And that's received incredibly well. I had one person I spoke with, and we're going to be speaking with them again, I think next week. But this person said to me, and this was his words, home ownership is the pinnacle of benefits, in his opinion. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because he understands that benefits that they offer should move the needle. And things that move the needle don't just impact workplace experience, they impact what happens at home. Because whatever happens at home comes to the workplace. You know that, right? Mm-hmm. Financial stress comes through that door If you're stressed out about your money, your financials, you're going to bring it to work and you're going to lower your productivity. And so those are two key things that we hear a lot of. And in general, though, I will say everybody's excited for it. Everybody's excited because everyone seems to recognize that this is the American dream. The home ownership isn't just a matter of shelter. It's aspirational. It is absolutely something that everybody wants and needs.
Larry, you made me think of one thing that I heard recently that was put really well. Are you familiar with Morgan Housel?
Morgan Housel? No, I'm not.
Okay. He's an author and has written several books that have done really well. I'll share it with you afterwards on a clip from his podcast that talks about home ownership being fundamental to everything, and just kind of connects it back to some of the challenges we're having in society right now.
Yeah.
And his belief is, if we can make home ownership more possible, like that is going to be steps in the right direction for so many different things. So I thought it was interesting.
Absolutely. And if I may, I think that there's reasons for why home ownership is so important and so fundamental. If you think about it, it's our largest household expense. It accounts for a full 1/3 of what most households spend. That's a big chunk of change. Financial stress can be accounted for in many different ways. But if you look at where the contributing factors are, it's going to come from the home. And if you're a renter, you're not seeing the returns of your money going out, right? There's no return for you because the equity you're building is for your landlord. So you never get ahead. That's the first thing. And then there's another thing. And I think this is really important to remember. And this is going back to something that a psychologist by the name of Abraham Maslow talks about. He created this diagram called the hierarchy of needs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you know that at the bottom of that pyramid is basically your needs, right? Shelter, you have need for food, right? Those security, those are things that sit at the bottom. Those are necessities. But as you go up that pyramid, there's self-actualizations, identity, aspirations. Those things all hit the top of the pyramid. And so there's 5 layers. And at the end of the day, if you look at the different benefit offerings that are out there, very few can align with every layer of that pyramid. Housing is one of those. And I think that's what makes housing so special. It is a motivator for everyone. Because like I said, it's not just a need, it's an aspiration.
For sure. So Larry, let's talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of it. Can you walk us through kind of how the program works?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we go through those 3 parts, right? We go through the part of we set them up with set up the employee with a platform, and we basically put them in this platform that allows for them to more effectively manage their finances. Now, this is the first part, and it's a really important part. And the reason is because our spending behaviors is what gets us in trouble. It's what keeps us from saving enough money for a home, and it also keeps us from keeping that home. Our spending behavior often is attributed to the fact that when your paycheck comes in to your bank account, it goes into your checking account, your default account, which is a spending account. And so the first thing we do is we create a separate new primary deposit account. And this is a FDIC insured account, right? But you default to saving. That's where the money goes. All inflows go there. The platform connects that account with your checking accounts, and through our financial service advisors, basically we call them equity advisors, right? Equity architects, and they help you set up your goals. So if you're trying to save a down payment, save for a down payment for maybe $20,000 or something like that, we'll work on what your monthly transfers are that needs to go toward paying a bill, and that platform automatically moves all the money in there for that very purpose. Okay, so you keep your money in your primary deposit account for the purpose of saving towards that goal. Again, that's done with an equity architect, and they will help guide you through that process from the start and all the way through your journey. And then, again, we go through this process where we provide on-site education, and this is going to be done either actually on premise or, at least in hybrid virtually. And we go through a series of education talking about what you need to do to prepare for home ownership. And if you already own a home, what you need to do to ensure appreciation of the value of that home, and how can you leverage home ownership for the purpose of long-term financial security. And then the third component, like I talked about with regards to the contribution, let's say, for instance, company X decides they want to give a $5,000 contribution toward purchasing a home. You, as the employee, go through the entire program, and it's automatically tracked. Your progress is already laid out, right? The milestones that you have to hit is already laid out to getting to the point where you need all the pieces in place before you actually purchase a home. And when you're ready, when the platform indicates that you've completed all your tasks, it will allow for you to request the funds, and that button pops up on your dashboard. You click on that button, that message goes to the home advisor who's working with you for the entire time, teaching you how to get yourself ready. And at that point, home advisor goes through everything, lets the employer know it's time, and the employer then wires the money directly to the title company for the purpose of closing on that home. It's as simple as that.
That's great. So when you have a conversation with an employer about offering this benefit, what's the biggest challenge that typically comes up? Because it seems like such a no-brainer, like that companies should do this. Like, yeah. I love the idea, but what's the biggest challenge you typically have with that?
Gosh, I got to tell you, the biggest challenge is around the mindset around turnovers. That's the biggest issue. It's funny. People talk about turnovers, and it never enters the executive boardroom for discussion because they look at it as an HR problem. And part of that problem is because they're looking at data that is only visible to them. It shows up on the balance sheets. Like I said, $6,000 to $9,000. Okay, it's an HR problem. So the challenge here is getting them to shift the mindset and say, hey, look at this. This is actually an operational and financial risk, because the real cost is much more than what we're seeing on the balance sheet. That's the biggest challenge, getting them to change their mindset to understand that turnovers is a much more serious problem than they think. And when you can change that mindset, you start to look at it. It's like, well, what has worked? Well, if we're still experiencing turnovers and everything we've offered hasn't worked, then what will work? You need to start looking outside of what you already have, right? We've had insurance, we've had 401ks, we've had commuter programs, pet insurance programs, all sorts of programs. We've launched what we call perks, right? We've included recreational aids, or even like ping pong, food stocked in the kitchen and stuff like that. We've tried everything, and yet it's not moving the needle. And so why don't we take a look at something that actually does affect real life decisions? So that's the conversation that we start to have once they realize that this is not, again, an HR problem, but that this is in fact an operational and a financial risk.
Certainly. So, Larry, anything else that you'd like to talk about today that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, I think that one of the things that I feel that's really important for employers to think about is that, this program isn't necessarily for all employers, honestly, right? This program is really for employers who truly care about the financial well-being of their employees, right? We're looking for people who are willing to think laterally, think outside the box, willing to embrace new solutions in order to address a problem. Looking for employers who really recognize that the problem is not just going to be falling on the shoulder of the HR people. This is and should be something that all executive teams should be engaged in.
Yeah, what you're talking about with retention being a company challenge, a company priority, not an HR one, definitely resonates for me. I mean, it is impossible to improve retention if it's just HR looking at it like that. They're not the ones leading the teams on a day-to-day basis. It's got to be a full company priority to retain our best people, no doubt.
Well, absolutely. And if you have a high turnover rate, I mean, I guess you can replace them as quickly as you can, but it takes time for people to embrace that culture. It takes them at least 12 to 18 months to embrace that culture. And so in the meantime, your culture is eroding. If you care about your culture, you need to think about how does that affect you? How does it affect the workplace culture when everybody's leaving? And how does that ultimately affect your growth? How does that affect your operations and so forth?
Yeah, for sure. Anything else that you've learned through building NestSTEPS that you'd like to talk about today?
I think those are the key things I want to discuss about, but did you have any specific questions you have in mind?
Just making sure that we got everything covered that you wanted to. But
okay.
Yeah, I guess the only other question I'd have is what do you want those you've worked with to say about your impact on them?
When you say those who we work with, you mean the customers?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what I want them to say is that we were able to help them achieve something that everybody wants, that we were able to help them to achieve home ownership, that we were able to help them get out from behind this vicious cycle of paying rent, of throwing money away and never getting ahead. I wish that employers will say, hey, we were able to help them create an environment that drives greater loyalty, that creates a greater connection, not just on the work level, but maybe on a life level, right? An emotional connection that really does foster trust and builds a greater relationship between the employer and the employee. That's what I'm looking for. I know that there's going to be a lot of people who may look at it and say, hey, we want to grow this. We want them to say, hey, we're so great and that we're going to continue to grow and become this very, very wealthy organization, right? Very rich organization. That's not our goal. I mean, yes, there's going to be revenue that comes with it. Our goal is really to achieve greater home ownership for everyone and to instill a sense of joy and loyalty within organizations.
How can listeners best find you or follow you in the mission?
Well, they can visit our website to start. That's NestStepsBenefits.com. That's nest with like a bird nest, right? Or they can connect with us. They can follow us on LinkedIn. And I would recommend just connect with me. My name is Larry Salazar. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me there. And just invite me to connect. I'd be happy to connect and we can continue our dialogue, or you can just follow me and listen or read some of the insights that I share on a regular basis.
Very good. We'll make sure that's all in the show notes as well. Larry Salazar from NestSTEPS. Thank you for being on Flywheel Leadership. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here.
Take care.